Hello, and welcome to this episode of Block Party. My name is Nic Cary, the co-founder and vice chairman of Blockchain. Today, I am joined by Maggie Love, the founder of SheFi. Maggie, thank you so much for joining us. Let's dig right in. Before SheFi, though, and I want to hear all about that, can you tell us a little bit about your entry point into crypto and digital assets? How did you get into this industry?
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me on the podcast. My crypto journey starts back in 2016. I was working at IBM and working on Watson for Financial Services. So, like early AI in air quotes. And I'd been at IBM for 4 years, and I was in this big meeting about, well, what are all the products IBM should be focusing on in financial services? And we were in this in-person meeting in Astor Place in New York, and there's a guy on the phone, and he was like, blockchain, blockchain, blockchain. And someone in the room was like, can you mute that guy? He's so annoying. And I was like, wait, someone's excited about something at IBM? Like, I need to know what this blockchain thing is. So I actually went to Barnes & Noble, the physical bookstore, after work that day, looked up the word blockchain. There was one book there called The Blockchain Revolution. I read it in like 2 days, and then I was like, okay, I don't know exactly what this is, but I have to be a part of it. And that book was really focused on the use cases,
Was
supply
that Tapscott's
chain.
book?
Yeah, it is Tap
Okay.
Scott's
Yep.
book.
So I set him up with his first ever Bitcoin wallet in 2013 here in London. So it was really cool to watch him have that like, holy crap, this is super interesting moment. So that's a funny connection.
That is a funny connection. Well, yeah. And then I just spent all my spare time at work, like hiding in cubicles and just figuring out like what was going on in blockchain. And, there wasn't a lot of companies. There wasn't a lot of information. There was stuff on Reddit. And I started reaching out to recruiters on LinkedIn and found a friend of a friend on LinkedIn. And he met me for coffee. He worked at Consensus out in Bushwick.
Yep.
And I went in my nice little IBM outfit, went into the office.
Everyone in
Saw
there is in
everyone
flip flops,
yeah,
wearing Hawaiian
flip-flops and,
shirts. Yeah.
exactly, like zero dress code. But the thing I remember the most is that everybody was really energized. Like you could feel the energy in the room and everyone was excited to meet me. Remember sitting on the iconic sofa and everyone was like, so nice to meet you. Like, hope you interview here. And once again, I was like, okay, I don't know exactly what this is, but like, I know I need to be a part of this energy. Like I was so ready to throw out all of my corporate garb. So I ended up joining Consensus in 2017.
Very cool. IBM for so long was just like this revered, technological Valhalla. And in some ways it sort of branded these big ideas like Watson and other things. But I think it was, it really took people like you to sort of break out and go, you know what, we actually need to like breathe, fuel and fire into this interesting problem set. So crypto, I think for so many people feels really intimidating. I mean, maybe the first interaction they have with it is just hearing the word cryptography and going, God, I struggled in school doing basic algebra. Like this stuff sounds really confusing. What are some of the things, you sort of use to demystify some of the vocabulary words in our space and maybe, speaking a little bit from your own journey, like you picked up the book, that was sort of an entry point. What resources do you think are available today that help people sort of get, I guess, more comfortable just even practicing learning about this?
Yeah, well, when I joined Consensus in 2017, I actually had to put together a presentation for the CEO of AMD, and I was like in Reddit looking for information, like what does Vitalik say about, at back at the day proof of work mining. So there's so much more information out there today and so many great places to start. But to go back to your first question, I think a lot of crypto is just technical jargon, right? Like you said, you hear the word cryptography, it's advanced math. And if you're a new person, you can know that it's advanced math that keeps things secure. And I think we are so used to operating in the digital world, but we don't actually think about, oh, this is a digital interaction that we're having, like even us on this Zoom call. So, when I'm saying we're trusting math and code, I'm like, you're already doing that.
Right.
When you're on a website, it's slightly different, but I think that really helps ground people in like, oh, this is just like a next step of trusting math and code, especially trusting code. And I trust code every day. I trust software every day, right? So it's about helping them make that connection through analogies and metaphors. Yeah. And I just love the game of how can I make this concept into something somebody already knows, right? So an imperfect analogy for what I would when I was teaching layer twos was, the layer 2 has to speak to Ethereum, like a roll up, and it's like presenting a book report, right? You only present the summary to the teacher, and then the teacher either has to accept it and add it to their catalog, and then you can go into like the classroom could challenge you for a challenge window if you wanted to go there. But to me, that's what it's all about. Legal
That's a
has
great
its own
analogy.
language. Finance has its own language. Crypto has a bit of the burden of having the financial language plus the crypto language. But for me, it's all about finding those analogies. And then there's a big difference, between educating and presenting information. So I don't just present something once, right? I introduce it, I reaffirm it, and then we always have Q&A in class because it, breaks it up, makes it more fun. And so people are used to seeing these concepts multiple times. And then as the course, grows, we start with blockchains, then we go into DeFi, and then we're, even going to touch AI. But, you keep repeating those concepts, and each week people come back and they're like, oh, yeah, now I know what this is. So that's really what education is about. They're like, well, yeah, there's newsletters and there's Twitter and there's, podcasts and there's shows. Like there's all this information being shared. But what a lot of people miss is that information is just words, and education is, making sure we're looking at the words that are new and communicating them in such a way that you can actually keep that concept in your head.
Yep. Well, I can definitely tell that you've got a bit of an educator's mindset through the scaffolding, and it's something I practice too because I started my career off as a teacher, and I found that, sort of reinforcing concepts and using blocks and then building more complicated arguments for things, over time gives you a lot of confidence. And there's so much jargon in all kinds of industries or hobbies or whatever. So when you first start with something, it can always be a bit intimidating, but I think part of it is finding someone that can help you on that journey. So one of the things I think we learn a lot about is that financial literacy is particularly bad, basically all over the place. It's not just unique, to institutions being unfamiliar with financial literacy. It's not really taught well in our schools. And I was wondering, maybe like being too provocative, but do you think like traditional financial systems have particularly failed women? And if so, how?
Yeah, I think once again, if we think about education and inviting people into our systems, right? A lot of it, it's not just like repeating the information, but then there's like the human psychology layer of like, well, what makes, women feel welcome into something like, and how is that potentially different than men? Like, right? I've studied a lot of like, especially in crypto marketing, I'll get back to traditional financial, but in crypto marketing on Twitter, there's like a lot of FOMO and a lot of hype and like you're going to be left out. And like that actually is for like the male ego, independent, like yeet all my money into crypto. Like that's actually good marketing, but that really alienates women. And so women actually really like collective experiences for education where you're not guilting them or FOMOing them or like, oh, I heard my friend say this, like put my money in. It's about kind of, making sure like you're supporting them in a different way. So the kind of like, I think traditional marketing you even see in traditional finance because the same kind of characters exist in stocks in traditional finance. So with women, you want to provide a totally different experience where it's like, hey, like we are going to get this. There's no shame or guilt around not knowing it. Like we're all going to get there. And then actually that community piece is super important. And we see people learning community all the time. And actually like Harvard did a study where they had self-paced courses. And when they added a community layer, their completion rate went up from like, don't have the exact numbers, but let's say like 15% to like 85%, right? So I do think traditional finance tries to cater to just like the individual, let's say, but there is human psychology involved in like the environment you're setting up and the way that you're communicating to women. And I think something I was always annoyed with at traditional finance and what I try to bring into SheFi is even the apps that are like, set your goals, like set your rainy day goal, where they're not really telling me, well, in the rainy day goal is like the S&P 500, right? Like the lowest risk asset. And then in the I want to make money fund, there is like investing in, this type of unique infrastructure or mineral or whatever it was. So yes, it was getting me to put my money into a platform, but I just have the belief that women actually want to know where their money's going into. And so I think like even when traditional finance tries to invite women in, yes, we should be goal-based and setting our risk tolerance preferences, but like never sharing any information like this is what is in this money market fund and this is why your money's here, like always felt a little like, well, then why am I putting my money in here? Because I can do this on any platform. So I think like I guess we can say like they're trying to cater to just like this busy professional who doesn't have time. But my thing with SheFi is like, yeah, I teach you what's under the hood. Like I teach you what's a liquidity pool. And like if you're putting your money into one, like what is that? So I just built SheFi also around like what I was annoyed with, which is like I actually want to know what's going on enough so that I feel really confident about my decision. Not just like, oh, put your money here because you're getting this rate. And this is, good if you have this risk tolerance or, this is safe, this is not safe.
Yeah, it's not just disclosure. So it's like, hey, you're going to really understand like the DNA of what's in this thing. So I like that a lot. So and the best founders are almost always working on a problem, one that's very personal to them, and then two, a problem that they have themselves. And so if you were to describe SheFi, sort of in an elevator pitch to someone in 30 or 60 seconds, what would that be?
Yeah, I would just keep it really simple and say that SheFi is crypto education for women. And we do this by focusing on building community around it. And my 3 pillars are education, experimentation, and as I said, community. So it's not just about learning and sitting on the sidelines, it's about doing. It's about setting up your wallet, making your first transaction, swapping, staking, lending, back in the day, minting. So my goal, because like I think with crypto especially, and probably, when with finance as well, you can read like, okay, yeah, this is what's going on. I get it. Like I know what a blockchain is. But we all know until you actually like make a swap and the money shows up back in your wallet, like what did you want to swap into?
Right.
That's when you're like, aha. And that's when you're like, okay, my money does come back to me, right? And so I think in order to feel really confident about navigating this space, you need both, education and experimentation and community. And that was a little bit longer than an elevator pitch because I got excited about it.
It was a long
methodology.
elevator ride. All good. So
But yeah, I would just say crypto education for women.
Okay. So crypto education for women, and talk to us a little bit about like the backgrounds of some of the community members.
Yeah, and it's changed over time. So my very first cohort, we had a lot of like female bankers. That was in 2020. And it was like friends and friends of friends. So people that heard about finance, right? Like to get into crypto before, let's say, non-fungible tokens, which I think really opened up the aperture of people that join. You were in tech or you were in finance, just like me. I was in tech. And so a lot of that first cohort was tech and finance, people from Google, people from DoorDash, people from JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs. And so, they had all like kind of heard about this and they were like, okay, I want to learn more. And then like, if we look at the SheFi cohort today, you're seeing all kinds of profiles. We have a lot of artists. We have a lot of creatives. We have women from finance. We have women from the big consulting groups, MBA programs that you've heard of, like Northwestern's MBA program or Columbia. And then, you have stay-at-home moms who are trying to re-enter the workforce. You have people whose partners founded multi-billion-dollar crypto protocols. I won't name names. Who are like, I just had never got it from him. And then they come back and they say, thank you so much. Like, we have a shared language now.
I love that.
And so most people find out through SheFi from LinkedIn. So it is a lot of that professional women joining. But then, in the United States, I would say like maybe that demographic is less technical, more professional. And then when we're looking at regions like India, it's like all technical women, but they're like a bit younger. So one thing you're going to notice in SheFi is like intergenerational women all learning the same thing, which I think chips away at this idea that you either stop learning or you are supposed to be learning with like a specific type of person or age cohort.
Super interesting. So if someone were to come to you and like maybe they're at this juncture in their careers and they're maybe curious to learn about like opportunities in crypto to go seek employment or to build business, what directions would you steer them in, and how do you sort of help people take their maybe existing career experiences and translate that into a crypto context?
Well, it's a great time for them because as we're seeing, crypto is growing up.
Yep.
Right? I joined because
the tent is getting a lot bigger too.
The tent is getting bigger. I joined in total permissionlessness, total decentralization. And now it's like, oh, wait, we're all going to Money 2020 this year, which, is one of the bigger fintech conferences. So we're becoming more fintech. So if you have experience at a big corporation, we actually need you to market now to your cohort of people you've been marketing to, unless I would say where crypto's been, which is kind of like marketing to each other in a way. So I'd say like now's a really good opportunity because you're going to see many more institutions and corporate entities hiring. So you can have that background. You don't necessarily need to translate it to like a crypto startup. So that's great. But where I would point people is like obviously the great thing about SheFi is you get to bring all that marketing experience, learn the language, and then now you have what you need to go get a job. And something I always tell people, and it doesn't matter if you're looking for a job in crypto or finance or whatever, but like we all need to be building our brands. And it took me a little while to do that, but oh my gosh, I'm posting every day on every channel because your brand and what you can communicate about your skills and what you do with the proof of actually doing the things is going to get you very far. So in SheFi, I say like start posting about what you're learning. Like if you don't know where to begin, and treat a social media platform, maybe you don't have to do all of them, as like a brand designer treats their portfolio, right? Like we all need portfolios now, no matter like what career you have. So if you're a marketer, like, writing a lot, if you're technical, obviously you have GitHub. So starting to think about like, how do I make sure that the proof of work exists and the proof of my journey exists and the proof of what I can do exists as well. Like, if you're a great marketer, you should have great marketing literature somewhere. And so I tell people a lot of that because I really do think in crypto as well, people are looking for
like proof
that proof
points,
of work.
right? Like evidence that you care and that you're following the space and learning. And I think that's like, it's a great point because you get you have places now to sort of evidence that your learning journey and what you care about. It's almost like your online reputation to a certain extent. And I do think employers, look positively on those things. That's super smart. From your point of view, do you think Web3 is more meritocratic than maybe traditional finance, or is that a myth?
That's a great question. I do think it's more meritocratic. You can work from anywhere. You can be from anywhere. I've had people help me with SheFi that have been in Africa, that are in the UK, that are in Asia, and I pay them in a stable coin. So, in that way, I think it's very meritocratic, and you'll go to conferences and you'll meet people from all over the world co-working on a project together. That might be changing as crypto's growing up. Like, oh, let's all go back to being in the same office. But I think in that way, like you said, if you have that proof of work, if you have those proof points, you can more easily get a job no matter where you are. Not only can work from anywhere and join a team, but you can get funding from anywhere through these grant mechanisms and through, traditional venture as well. Finance, you have to be in specific cities. You have to,
Go to the
have
right
started
school, have gotten into the
right
program,
school.
get credentialed, all that stuff. Yeah, it's a really different, I think operating environment in some ways.
Totally. And I was a little frustrated with that because I didn't move to New York until I was 26. I graduated, college a few years before that. And I just no one had really told me that like in order to really get in, you needed to have been interning in the banking system when you were like a
Right.
junior in college and know this person and get this reference and your mom or dad was this person. And I felt so frustrated at that because it just wasn't a part of my upbringing and my background. So I was definitely like, oh, I could have done, I think I'm a very agentic, capable person. Like if somebody had taught me spreadsheets, I could have done spreadsheets, right? But, everything works out as it's supposed to. But there's definitely a very different way of getting in a start in traditional finance.
It's probably one of the things that motivated me the most really early on when I first learned about Bitcoin, and then, crypto evolved from there. But the idea was that it was just an open platform that anyone could participate in, and that it sort of treated everybody the same. You need to have access to it. So there are some barriers to entry. I mean, I think internet access is one of them. Smartphone proliferation was a big deal, but a lot of that has sort of come to pass over the last 10 years. And so there are legitimate arguments in the early days around, access to some of this stuff. But the idea was that, this thing wouldn't discriminate based on the circumstances of your birth or your gender or where you were born in the world. And that was really interesting because the traditional financial sector, setting up a bank account is pretty difficult. You need to have all these identity documents. You may need to have source of funds and income. They may charge you to do so. There may be holding periods. Depending on where you're born, you'll never have access to it. And then, by the way, you're at the very bottom of a financial pecking order because there are private banks and then there's exclusive products for commercial banking and all this other stuff. And what's cool about crypto is it just gives everybody this equal access to being able to transact with anybody else they desire to instantly and at a very low cost. And so To me, that's like a very profound change in the access to being able to do things like manage your money and build and create wealth. I remember in New York, 2014, I met these two amazing women. One of them was a PhD who had been a refugee from Afghanistan, and she was working on doing digital literacy training and education in Afghanistan, but found it impossible to fund her humanitarian work because it was impossible to move money into that jurisdiction. And so she had this very noble use case. And then also, this was a country where if people found out that women were hoarding or holding or earning money of any kind, they would just confiscate it from them. And so by having crypto wallets, there was a way for people to have a little bit more agency sovereignty and financial independence. And I just felt that story was just such a profound kind of, an early emergent use case of something that could be widely proliferated and hopefully, in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, we can really put endpoints. Really, when I mean that is like everybody in the world having access to this better way of moving and creating wealth around the world. So that's why I got super excited about all this in the first place. But I think your work is so key. So how do we move beyond, though, maybe like the diversity as a talking point in like crypto to structural change and access to the building and having a seat at the table, so to say, for women in their careers as it relates to crypto and tech in general?
Yeah, I love that question because SheFi is not actually like a women in Web3 organization. And you're going to be like, wait, what? Because like I've never done a panel. I mean, maybe in my early days, I've never done like a panel like women in Web3. And to clarify, actually, SheFi does not host what's it like being a woman in Web3, what's it like being a woman in crypto. My belief is that there's tons of badass women ready to enter the space, and they don't necessarily need like a let me tell you about being a woman in Web3. They just need somebody that looks like them, showing like you can do the thing. So we host SheFi summits. Those are large one-day events, 400 to 600 people per event actually coming and sitting in chairs. And like I said, it's founders, it's investors, it's marketers, it's hackers, and it's about the technology. It's about how this actually impacts people's lives, like being able to take out your own loan because you can't get a one from the German banking system on Aave and paying for your mortgage, right? Or down payment. It's about, growth hacking, and it's about career. So nothing about that is necessarily like diversity, but if you come to a SheFi summit, it's all women on stage. And people will ask me, well, then does that mean that's for me if I'm a man? And I'm like, there's never been a conference I have not gone to because it's all men on stage. Right. And so I think the way we get past it is continuing just to create the environment and the space of women sharing their expertise. And then, we don't even have to talk about the diversity piece. So I think that's how we get through that. And, I think that when you're building a community, right, there's like girls' schools and there's girls' volleyball teams and there's girls' basketball teams, right? And so building a community for something that you identify with is not new. But yeah, to get away from that kind of like, fund this because it's women, it's like, no, fund this because hundreds or thousands of women show up to a classroom. They actually learn about your project. They take action on that project. And because of the way I've set it up with the community, it's proven that they're longer term, stickier users. So instead of spending like marketing dollars on KOLs, you're actually getting what is an engaged group of people showing up to hear about your thing. And so I think when I'm talking to protocols now who I partner with, everyone's looking for long-term users. Everyone's looking to grow their community. SheFi is one of the largest communities of real humans is not the right word. That doesn't sound kind to our airdrop farmers, but like long-term engaged users, right? And so that's how I start to think about like what we actually provide.
Very cool. If we look back at what sort of happened over the last 10 years, I think crypto went from being like quite a niche, nerdy experiment to something that sort of became culturally relevant and now is bridging into, traditional finance, into wide scale internet adoption. But from your point of view, like, what do you think like mass adoption will look like, and what can we maybe expect over the next, 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, we've truly seen it go from niche with lots of startups and ideas, totally same thing as we saw in the early internet, right? Like lots of companies and, kind of a bunch of booms and busts of bubbles or hype cycles. And out of that, we're seeing like these companies that are just going to continue to rise into success. And I do think a lot of that is going to be in this finance space. I think it's going to be finance and AI. So finance, it's going to be, you don't know that you're using Stripe's newest blockchain. You might know you're using a stable coin, like this new dollar-backed currency, but you're not necessarily aware of, like, you don't have to necessarily learn, about it. Other than that, like, it represents a dollar. And so I do think in a lot of our payment infrastructure, people are just going to tap, swipe, scan QR code. We're already seeing all of that today, and it's crypto under the hood. And so I think that'll be one way. And then I think there'll be the second way is that the people who do know it's crypto, like actually using crypto for everyday payments, like the original vision, and more, and that currency being accepted by the end point and it being, changed into cash or not. So I think we'll see it like really in our payments infrastructure, which is what a lot of the companies are betting on. And then we're going to see it in the tokenization space, in the investing space, right? You have, big banks getting into real world assets, which is just non-blockchain assets tokenized to be put on the blockchain, turn into that digital receipt. And so you're going to see, just because of that T going from T+3 to T0, all of that good stuff they say in the financial space that they're looking for. And maybe everybody from the professional banker to the everyday person just notices things are cheaper. Things are cheaper and faster and global, which I think is what we all want. And then I think we're going to definitely see this explosion of digitally native AI agents using a digitally native currency, right? That makes a lot of sense to me. Two things born totally on the internet, using each other. And like back in 2017, Joe Lubin always talked about that, like IoT.
Yeah,
you're gonna be able
machine
to,
to machine
connected
payments.
devices, machine to machine. And, back in the day, people were like, yeah, okay, like we'll get there. But I really think we're going to get there. And there's going to be these agentic AI economies, and it not being like totally operated by humans on the back end, like the malt book thing. It was actually just humans. But I'm really excited about that. So I think that's where it's going. Those would be my two big bets. And then, my hope would be that everyday commerce and some creativity is around. Like I love the creative era and bringing in so many different types of people, giving them access to these tools and technologies to go to market the way they wanted to. I don't know what exactly it looks like because that's in more of its bust. But I hope something comes back in that creative space.
Yeah, I was always super excited about that one too, which is like creators, musicians, artists, architects, composers, basically having more ownership over the things they create, and through the tokenization of their catalogs or their art or their poetry or whatever. And I do think that's going to happen. It sparked this crazy innovation period, but then it also sparked just like way too much, I would say, like work that didn't have the depth to it. And so then it became very difficult to figure out which projects were like more legitimate than others. But maybe that was inevitable. I don't know. It's kind of hard to tell, but I think we'll see some interesting things happen in that space. So walk us through, for someone who's interested in joining SheFi, just like maybe a quick 30-second-ish. Like what's it take to sign up? What can they expect? And when they finish the courses, what do they get at the end? And how do they continue to engage with the community?
Yeah. So once you join the community, you're in the community, right? So we have lots of infrastructure around that, including Telegram chats. And so you'll see women in those chats from like 2020 with their local geography still engaging. And so you're always in the community, which is great. And so what you do is you sign up, you join a 6-week cohort-based program, 2 classes a week, each class its own topic, and then each week its own quest. So you'll not only learn, but you'll set up your exchange, you'll set up your Trezor hardware wallet, you'll fund that, you will trade on the Base app, you will stake RIF, which is a rootstock Bitcoin token in the Bitcoin ecosystem, and you'll download Decentraland. And so those are kind of like the main quests. And then you will also learn about stable coins, and we'll do some AI stuff too, because I just can't help but learn new things. So by the end, you'll learn and you'll do all those things as well. So that's what it's really all about. You start, maybe you haven't ever touched crypto, and you leave and you've done like 6 to 7 things on chain over 6 weeks.
Very cool. And I heard a rumor that you are considering starting your own podcast. So any particular areas of focus that you're excited to learn or explore?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of our newsletter readers say like, we just want to hear more. I've always been really interested in money. I think that's really why I joined the crypto space, like money and agency and ownership and what to do with money. So I think it could be a bit broader about that, and kind of like just what does this value mean to all different types of people, like founders and other people exploring different things than we are in crypto. So I think it might have to do something with money. That's just like a theme that shows up in like when I bought Ethereum, I was like, this is the greatest thing ever. Like no one, my VC friends can't buy it. Like I feel so empowered. So probably, something around that, but we're trying to be good stewards of our community. And like, I'm going to talk to a lot of them actually who read our newsletter, and like, what else are they interested in from SheFi? But yeah, something around money.
Cool. All right. Well, appreciate that very much. Do you have any like sort of closing thoughts or reflections about the state of crypto today, and maybe an invitation to potential SheFi community members around where they should go to sign up?
Yeah, I definitely feel like I think the loss that many of us feel having joined a place like Consensus in 2017 and just see people building all sorts of like cypherpunk projects in this totally decentralized space. And you needed that revolutionary momentum back in the day to like, oh, okay, we're like partnering with Stripe and like doing stable coins and, ETFs and like real world assets are going to be like custodied by banks. Right. But so there's definitely a bit of that like, yearning in a way for how it used to be. But what I will say is like the fundamental technology is to empower you and give you agency over your assets, which was not possible in any other era of the internet. So my invitation is like, you could see all this and maybe like, well, I'm not a traditional finance person and this is where crypto is going. So maybe it's not for me. But no, there is still this underlying decentralization, own your money, access financial apps from anywhere in the world and get the same rate no matter where you're living, true equity, like we were talking about earlier in that way. And, come take kind of ownership and agency over these next assets, which are bound to be something we end up using in everyday life. So my invitation would be like, come learn about decentralization, come learn about how it can be a tool in your toolbox for agency and for ownership as the world continues to change. And then, and learn about how things have shifted, but that core is really is still there, even if in the big narratives and what's taking over the news cycle, it doesn't always feel like it's there.
Yeah, I always sort of talk with some of the older founders and firms in the space. Like, do you think, crypto is still sort of punk and alternative? And the reality is it doesn't really matter. It's like it's grown a lot. It still has some of those very foundational revolutionary ideas in it, especially around what you described as like agency and sovereignty over your currency, wealth, and assets, things that we hold dear, like privacy and custody over secrets. But you can also operate in the crypto space, across a security and privacy spectrum, which is to say, like, it may make sense to use some custodial offerings for certain things, but it also makes sense to really understand a self-custodial model and hear all the reasons why, because of security hacks and breaches and compromises and the surveillance and the rent seeking that happens in these centralized systems where you have all kinds of perverse incentives to monetize them. And so it's just a really important, like broad spectrum of things to learn about. And I think the work you're doing is really important. It's not just about, role models of all kinds, but especially ones that can really bring in and educate the next adopters and get those crypto curious to become more crypto fluent. So Maggie, really appreciate you joining us today and for your takes on all our questions today. And for our listeners, please remember to subscribe to Block Party and leave a review if you enjoyed today's episode. And please don't forget to check out SheFi. So until next time, I'm Nic Cary. On behalf of the entire blockchain team, thank you for tuning in.